Welcome to another chapter podcast with your hosts, Claire and Rebecca.
Do you love books? Well, you've come to the right place. Join us as we discuss all things books.
Welcome to Chapter 3 of Another Chapter, the podcast.
For anyone interested, a list of all recommendations of books mentioned during the podcast will be in the show notes. So when we were brainstorming who we would like to invite to be our first author interview, we had a short list of criteria. We wanted an Irish author, someone who had a book recently released, and someone we could have a bit of crack with because the nerves of interviewing someone who writes books for a living. And this lady came straight to mind. She's the new queen of contemporary romance in Ireland and elsewhere if the reviews are anything to go by. And both the author and her books have been an absolute joy to get to know. Without further ado, our first author interview is with Catherine Walsh.
Welcome to Chapter 3. Our guest today is Catherine Walsh, author of feel-good romantic comedies One Night Only, The Rebound and new release Holiday Romance. Releasing the first of these books in July 2021, she has released 2 books this year. Wow. She is a digital-first author, which means all the focus is on the ebook and audiobook. Catherine's 4th book will be out in April 2023, and the name and plot is to be announced. Now, if you're a die-hard paperback reader, you can also order her books in physical form. But Catherine, can you tell us a bit more about how people can go about that?
Sure. So I'm not available in shops, but you can order from the shops. You can go in and you can walk up to your friendly bookseller and ask them, and they can check that for you. Sometimes they might not always be able to, but a lot of times they will be if you want to support them. But otherwise, I'm available on Amazon, on Book Depository, and anywhere that you would buy your books online, you should be able to order from them. However, if you're not, just ask me. I'll find out. I'll find out for you.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you. So I am a big fan. I was shared, or I read your first book, The Rebound, at the start of the year. Anya Reeds, who is a friend of yours and an Instagram friend of ours, was really recommending the book, and I picked it up, and I will fight anyone over Luke as my book boyfriend. He was just... I think it's just the fact that, like, especially that it's an Irish setting and it was just clearly an Irish guy, and just the humour and just the vibe from it. I remember reading it and just being like, I have not read a book like this. And I'm relatively new to the contemporary romance genre, a big fan as of this year especially. But The Rebound is definitely up there in like my top romance books. So I'm a big, big fan, and I have been pushing your books on everyone that will listen to me. So we were delighted that this month's Tired Mammy Book Club pick is Holiday Romance, which is your new book. Do you want to tell us a bit about that before we get asking the random book questions?
Sure. So Holiday Romance is my 3rd book. It is a Christmas book. And it is about these 2 friends, Molly and Andrew. They are both Irish expats. They live in Chicago. And every year for Christmas they meet and they fly home to Ireland for Christmas together. And the book takes place in now times, in modern times, but also looks back over their various flights together over the last 10 years. So hopefully you get a sense of their friendship developing. And then this year, when a storm happens and everything goes wrong, you might see a little bit something more than friendship develop between them. So it is a friends to lovers, to use the romance trope, festive romance. And I'm really proud of it. I really love it.
I have to just jump in and just say that I wouldn't usually reach for romance books, but I absolutely adore this book. Like, I'm trying to get my hands now on your other books because I couldn't put it down. I'm like, we would usually sit down in the evening after we put the child to bed and watch something on TV, but I was like, I need to know what happens next. It was just so good and so relatable. So well done. It's absolutely fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's fabulous. I was lucky enough to get an advance copy of it back in October. Loved it and have bought it since, and I have the other books, and we cannot recommend them enough. So Claire is going to get on the back copies now as well to get up to speed.
And I'll
That's
start
what I
pushing
like to
them in.
hear.
Okay, so perfect. We'll start off the questions. So can you tell us a little bit about how you became a writer, Catherine?
Sure. So, I mean, I think like every writer, you start by being a reader, and that was a huge part of my life as a child in my teenage years. And then in peak me fashion, I didn't sit down one day and be like, "Oh, I'm going to write a book." I sat down to practice because I knew I'd one day write a book, but I needed to practice first. And I was in my sort of early 20s, and I just sat at an open Word document and just tried to write. And there was several years of that. I found it really, really difficult. And then one year I did NaNoWriMo. And for those who don't know, that is National Novel Writing Month. And it takes place every November. And I would really urge any person who would like to be a published writer one day and who is really struggling to figure out how to do it or to just make the time to commit to it, 1 November, just do it. There's loads of help. And they ask you to write 50,000 words in 1 month. And that's it. And you sort of break it down every day. I think it's like 1,600 words or something. And I did it. It was really difficult. I could do that now, no problem. But the very, very first time, I found it really, really hard, really, really tough. But I got through it. And when I did that, I was on top of the world. I felt I could do absolutely everything. And so the next thing I did then was write my first book. That book did not get published. It was years until I got published, but that was definitely how I became a writer and how I sort of realized I can do this. I can definitely do this. It's going to take some time, but I can do it.
Wow.
And yeah, that's how it began.
Excellent. And that's a very accessible way as well. Like you were saying, anyone could sit down and do that, which is
Absolutely anyone.
unreal. And actually that follows on quite nicely to my next question. Are you a planner, or do you let the ideas come to you as you write?
So I'm definitely a mixture of both. I think I'm still figuring it out, if I'm honest. I would always tell people I'm not a planner because I have seen people who are planners and they terrify me. They have like massive spreadsheets, they've got color codes, they've got like everything breaking down. And I don't understand that. You do have to be a planner when you are publishing a book because your publisher won't just let you run off and write a book. So I will always have the very, very, very important hook, which is sort of the premise of the story. And then for my own sake, I have a synopsis. So I have a general idea of what the story is going to be. And I think that really helps with writer's block. So I'll always have a middle, beginning, and an end, but it will be quite bare bones stuff. So the fun bit of writing for me is finding these fun characters. It's finding all the stuff in between. But as long as I have a general plot to follow, I'm okay. So that's what I do. But ideas wise, they do just kind of come to me. In this genre, it's very, very fun. And we can say, well, what if X meets Y? What if boy meets girl? And what if they're on the moon or something? You know what I mean? You can kind of do anything and then let the story develop from there. So ideas come from nowhere and then a little bit of a plan. But if I plot too much, it won't work. Then the story's told and I get bored. So it's part of the fun is finding out the story as you write it.
Okay, that's nice.
That's
I like that. Yeah. And it sounds like not necessarily that you're having great fun doing the writing, but in a way the process sounds like a bit more fun than just because I'd say it's a bit more stressful than fun, to be honest.
I mean, yeah, we can get into that. Yeah, no, it is. Though there's like little moments that are fun, and then it quickly becomes not fun.
Yeah.
But those little moments are great.
Yeah, you live for those. Just on the genre of romance, or contemporary romance specifically, Claire and I have often discussed that the genre of contemporary romance, we always come back to that. We feel it's very generally underappreciated. Would you agree with this?
100%. And I don't know if I'd even just put it to contemporary romance. I think romance as a whole is underappreciated. And that is nothing new. That's been the way since the history of books. I mean, there are people who can speak about it much more eloquently than me. I'm sure there's been studies about it. I do think it stems mainly from misogyny, and misogyny that even we as women have. This is a genre that is primarily written by women for women, that deals with the female gaze, that deals with things that women go through. And it is looked down upon. The way happiness is kind of looked down upon. These are traditionally happy books, and
Yes.
that's not cool. Being happy isn't cool, not like the very serious, very sad men books. Nothing against very serious, very sad men books, which I do read a lot also. But sometimes you just want to be sad. But it is, and I think even nowadays, contemporary romance is going through a huge boom at the moment, which is wonderful, especially for me. But even now, I mean, I will get reviews that will say, "Oh, 5 stars, love the book," even if it's only a romance, or it's great for chick lit, or I really liked it, but it's just romance. And you'll get all of these qualifiers from these people, and they make me not the non-romance readers, sure, fine, but when you have someone who tells you in the review how much they love romance and how much they read romance, but it's only romance, that makes me so sad. And I think even nowadays, we still have to catch ourselves to get out of this mindset that romance is somehow lesser than the other genres out there. And I think we all have a lot of work to do with that. I think, I'm starting to see more support from booksellers for romance, which is great, because usually you walk into a bookshop, you're not going to find any romance books on the shelves. Like you won't. And that has only really started with TikTok and with Bookstagram, which is fantastic. It's so great. And there's a lot we need to do still to get romance at the forefront. I mean, this time of year around, we're seeing all the end of year lists. So you'll have the Times best lists and the Guardian's best, and all the best books of the year. None of them will have a romance section. They'll have crime, they'll have science fiction and fantasy, they'll have fiction, they'll have non-fiction, they'll have science and music and history and whatever. They won't have romance.
That came up. Somebody posted up the New York Times list actually recently, Rebecca. I don't know, I can't even think offhand who it was, but the comment that actually came out of it was there are no romance books. I think there was one that was listed, and it has really sparked this conversation that you're talking about. And I suppose for me, just before you mentioned it, I kind of sat in here and I was like, it's definitely a misogynistic thing. And like, who makes these lists? Do you know, it's who decides what books are worth reading and what aren't, and what's important and what's not. So it's just very interesting that that's something that you've come out with, and it's also a conversation that we have been having on Bookstagram, and just that they're not being recognised for what they are and the values that they bring.
With Bookstagram especially, sometimes I'll get, and especially with Irish Bookstagram, and you'll have friends of friends recommending, because we're a small country and we all know each other. And I will get a lot of comments saying, I mean, so sort of in what you just said, I wouldn't usually pick up a romance. Or I will get a lot of comments saying, I really liked your books, even though I don't like romance. And my sort of thing is, well, if you like this one, you might like others. And I'm waiting for people to make that connection. Whereas, well, if you liked this book, try something similar in the genre, because maybe you do like romance. You're just not that you're not letting yourself like it, but that like it's okay to say that you like romance and that you read romance. And again, I think it's a much wider conversation that the whole genre and that all these authors are having at the moment. But I think in terms of misogyny, I think that's where it stems from sure.
It, funnily enough, actually, I think it was only this morning I spotted it. Again, one of our Instagram friends did share, I think it possibly was the Times actually as well, have released a top 10 romance books from 2022. And I saw it and was like, oh, that's great. I've only read 2 books of the 10 or however many were on the list. And then I was like, well, why is that? Why are they singling that out? Is it just because this year was quite on trend for romance, or was it, I'm not sure, have they done the same thing for other genres as well? So I was like, oh, why do they feel the need to categorize it separately? Maybe the other genres were there as well. I don't know, but it was nice to see it. It's a step in the right direction, definitely. But it would be better if it was encompassed within the general, the lists of books. But it's definitely something that comes up. I'm a member of an online book club, actually, that is, it's romance books is kind of what we read. And even within that, kind of going back to your point, Catherine, where people might say, oh, I enjoyed this one, even though I wouldn't normally read it. Maybe it's just a particular author you didn't particularly like their style or something. The same way I could read a thriller book and love it, and then the next thriller book I pick up, I just don't particularly like that one.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it might just be a particular book doesn't suit you, and then people just kind of write it off as that whole genre. So it's a pity, because there are so many good writers and so many good stories, and especially ones like yours, Catherine, that are very kind of from an Irish point of view, which is lovely, because even that alone is so rare, that it's, as an Irish person, you can see us in the characters, while it's still nice and lovely, and there's love and people are getting together. And on that note, just how awkward is it to write a sex scene? Does the editor or publisher have an impact on what kind of content you can include then as well?
I mean, great question. I'm sure every writer has a different answer to this. For me, it's not awkward at all.
Great.
I mean, two reasons for that. One is, for me, the sex scenes in a sexy romance should be the most important scenes in the book, because it is there to a good sex scene will propel the plot forward. It will bring characters together. It should be the climax, pun intended, of like all this emotion that you've been leading up to and all this tension. It should be this again, pun intended, joining of two characters that you're waiting for, and it should be the moment that you go, oh my god, like that should be it. And so it's a very, very exciting. Maybe in a crime, it is the reveal of the killer. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what it should be, like a real high point of the book. And then writing it is quite mechanical then, because it's kind of like, I would imagine it's sort of like choreographing a fight scene or something. It's very like, well, for me, it's very like, well, if he took his jeans off over there, why would he be removing his belt on the bed? And if his hand is there, where's her arm? And is there a blanket, or are they? And then it's like, so it's very like trying to figure out where they are at any one point. But I really, really enjoy writing them. And I think characters can reveal a lot to each other. So from a craft point of view, I love them, and I think they're really important. And then editorially wise, publisher wise, they do have a say on kind of what goes. I think it depends on maybe who you are, what you're writing. Because I write in a commercial genre, in romance, we are always thinking of the audience, and we're always thinking of, to be very honest, on reaching the widest audience possible. That's really important. I would like everyone to enjoy my books. So because of that, it is hard to kind of straddle that line, especially when it comes to romance, and sort of how we always call it in the romance world, open door, closed door. So open door, the more explicit you get on the page. Closed door, it can be fade to black, it can be a kiss on the cheek, it can be implied, and that's that. And the great thing about the genre of romance is that there's something for everybody, and you can find that for everybody. The hard thing is trying to appeal to everybody. So I try very hard to kind of straddle a line that it gives you, if you want more, there's a bit there. But if it's not really your thing, you can read it. Don't worry. You can recommend it to friends and not be blushing, and it's fine. So I relied heavily on my editors to sort of tell me that. My first book, One Night Only, I actually wanted to go much more explicit than I am. But I was told to kind of bring that all back and just tone it down a bit. And whereas for now, I think they've realized that the market has changed a little bit. With holiday romance, I actually toned it down myself, because I wrote one or two scenes, and then in the first draft, and then I sat down and I was like, it's a Christmas book. And I was just like, maybe we'll keep it for another story. And I think I don't think we missed anything by not having it in the book. I don't think it was necessarily needed. I think it worked out quite well. But with this book, my fourth book that I'm writing now, my editor said, go for it. Just write it and see what happens. So that's been quite fun for me. But as long as it serves the characters and as long as it serves the story, I try not to set limits on myself. But yeah, I'm all for sex scenes. Gives me all the sex scenes.
Yeah, I didn't even think of the sex scenes when I recommended this book to my mom.
No, yeah, no, it's like, and it shouldn't be, and they're not. I mean, I'm very tame compared to a lot out there, to a lot that I read as well. So, I'm hoping, yeah, it's very recommendable. Hopefully,
Yeah.
And in fairness, the scenes, I never thought about the fact that you actually literally have to think about the logistics of them.
you do.
And
Yeah.
they do not read that way, thankfully. But
A lot of work.
that's so funny.
That must be hard work, though, to be fair.
It
I
is,
don't
yeah.
think, you don't think like that.
And like, you're trying, hopefully when people read those scenes, they'll get butterflies in their stomach. But when you're writing it, you're just the least turned on you could ever be. You're just sitting in your cold apartment trying to like figure it all out, and like, it's the most unromantic thing in the world. And hopefully it doesn't read like that when you come out the other
It doesn't.
side.
And I have to say that as I read it, and as I said, I wouldn't be a big reader of romance books. I am converted 100% because I'm reading another one now at the moment, and it's also great. But I really felt like when they were getting together, that I was getting the butterflies in my tummy, and I was like, oh my God, this is so exciting.
Yeah.
And you feel like you're back in that place yourself where you are. Is this happening? Is it not going to happen? Did he mean to touch me like that? All those kind of things, like, they definitely surface up, I think. So well done. Yeah.
I think all Andrew had to do, to be honest, was turn around and smile at a certain point in the book, and I was like, oh,
He's a big smile at that one as well. He knows what he's doing.
I'd love to know who would play him now in a movie. Actually, we should have considered that.
My answer to it's always Paul Mescal. Always, like, he'll just do all my characters all the time.
Okay.
Clearly.
yeah.
Okay, well, that's fine. I'm perfectly okay with that mental image.
The
So.
Paul Mescal universe.
On the subject of Andrew and Molly, on your stories recently, you were asking for suggestions for names for a character. It was quite fun, actually. I think I sent in a suggestion for a male character. How do you come up with the names for your characters? So we'll just say Molly and Andrew, or any of them.
Yeah, so it is just kind of like ideas. They just kind of appear. And I find character names really important. I mean, that sounds a bit flippant. They're very, very important to me. And if they work, they work. That is fine. If they don't work, I'm furious, and it'll take me a while. I mean, with this one, with this character's name, that I was asking for a very bad prison, so I was giving people the opportunity to have their revenge by putting a bad prison's name in the book. So with this one, I couldn't think of one, and I was going through, what I usually do is I go through like lists of baby names, and I just repeat them to myself until one sticks, and nothing was sticking. So I just went out to people. There's a character in this book as well, a secondary character, and I just wasn't happy with her name. I think I've changed her name about 2 times. And that takes up a lot of time. It's very difficult because I will spend half an hour sitting there going, what is her freaking name? And trying to match her and it is just a pure instinct thing. And then on top of that, there is the Irish thing. So, you mentioned that like these are books either set in Ireland or with Irish characters or with something Irish about them. But I would never call them Irish rom-coms. They're rom-coms set in Ireland or something to do with Ireland, because I tone it down a lot for the international audience, and that is specific because I've had reviews from Ireland where they're like, where's all the Irish stuff? And I'm like, no one else will get it. So it is toned down, but what I do is have the names. So I will always try and put in Irish names, and I'm going to challenge myself to put in the quote unquote more difficult Irish names going forward, and hopefully start a little revolution there where people can learn to pronounce our beautiful language and our bonkers spelling.
That's good. It's quite a natural process. So if it feels right, it's right.
Yeah, it's real instinct stuff for sure, definitely.
Okay, very good. On the subject of Bookstagram, while we're at it, your account is super fun. It's witty. It's really enjoyable to follow as a reader, as a social media user. What has been your experience of using social media to promote your writing?
I love it. It's my favorite thing to do. I don't even think of it as promotion, if I'm honest. I think I mark very clearly when I am promoting, because I'm just like, just buy them, please buy them. It's just me talking. And I actually used to work in publishing. I used to work in social media, in a very professional, here's where you can buy the book and happy chocolate day, like the way every publisher in the history of publishing does. And we don't even pay attention to them anymore because it's the same thing over and over and over again. And that's what I did at the very start. When my deal was announced, I set up a Twitter account and an Instagram account. And I was like, hi, everybody. Just not me, a very friendly, not that I'm not friendly, but like a very generic author selling her books. And I was bored and I was trying to think of content and I was bored and I didn't want to do it. So I just ended up being myself. And that is all I am on those accounts, for better or for worse. I'm just there. There's no thought goes into those accounts. It is just me at any one moment being bored and going onto Instagram. And for that reason, I love it. Because there's no pressure there. I'm not adopting a persona. And there's nothing against authors who do that. Like you have to protect yourself. It is expected of you a lot of the time to be a certain way on Instagram. I'm not on TikTok. I'm not on Facebook. I'm not on accounts that I don't feel comfortable in or that I don't enjoy being on. So I'm never pretending to be someone that I'm not ever. So I find it really easy and I really enjoy it. I'm not looking to sell books out of it. I never feel like I'm failing at it. So I can just have fun. And I think that's really important. And especially on Instagram, on Bookstagram, everyone has been, 99% lovely. And I feel like I've made some genuine friendships on there. I've discovered a lot of new great authors on there. There's always a little bit, you will sometimes get tagged in bad reviews, in mixed reviews, you sometimes get messages. And that is just part and parcel of being an author in the modern world. And you just have to deal with that. But 99% of the time, everyone is lovely. So I really enjoy it and you will never kick me off it.
Well, that's good to hear because we really enjoy following you on it. You are very honest about the writing process on Instagram as well. Does writing energize you or exhaust you? And what advice would you give to burgeoning authors? You kind of mentioned this already, but for you, how does writing feel?
Wow, another good question. It's difficult. I have always written. I was thinking about this earlier this year. So in at the end of March this year, I took a career break from my job to write full time. And I was really interested to see how that would go. Like, would I get sick of it? Would I realize like, oh no, actually this isn't for me? But thankfully it is for me. I realized very quickly it's all I want to do with my life. Like I just want to write books. And that is what I've always done, even when I was working full time or when I was, in full time education. I was always writing. I would come home and I would write on the weekends. And I would tell friends that I was going on a date and I wasn't. I was sitting at home and writing. Like I was just always doing it. And it was always a thing that I wanted to do. And I do get energized by it. I love doing it. I don't take days off, not because I'm like, oh, I have to work, but because I don't want to. Because when I take a day off, I'll get an idea or I'll get something and I'll even write for a little bit. I love it and I get energized from it, but it is really hard. Writing a book is really, really difficult. And it is very, very tiring and it is very stressful. And I think especially, I pour my heart and soul into every single book. My worst nightmare is putting out a mediocre book or putting out a book that's just fine. Oh God, just the thought of that gives me like chills. I want to do the best job I can with every book. And that is draining. It is really, really draining. And you can, I was trying to figure out when I started writing full time, I was like, well, do I do an 8-hour workday? Like, do I do a 9 to 5 or do I just do 2 hours? But you can do more in those 2 or 3 hours than you could answering emails all day. Like, I really do believe that. So it is energizing. It is all I want to do. I love doing it. I will always do it. Even if, these books had failed, I'd still be writing. I'd still be doing it. But I think it's really important to emphasize that it is a really difficult thing. And so if you're struggling, if you're starting out as a writer, if you're like, oh, will I ever be able to do this? It's meant to be hard. It's not easy. It's not meant to be easy. Even Holiday Romance, which I think has been the easiest book I've ever written. I loved writing it. I had a very, very easy time writing it. It was still really hard. Like I was still like crying about it. I was stressing about it. I was writing on my whiteboard being like, well, if they go to Buenos Aires, how do they get to Paris? And like looking up flight maps. And it was really, really difficult. So It is that balance between the two, and that is a risk of sounding very pretentious. Being an artist, I feel like I'm sure no matter what craft you do, getting into it, you have the ups and downs. For me now, it's about learning how to balance that. I think that answers your question.
It does. It absolutely does. And it gives us a really good insight to your life and to the life of an author, which is something not many of us are familiar with. But in fairness, you do give us snippets of that on Instagram as well, which is great. You know, no one is under any illusion that it is simple. And we all appreciate the honesty, but also it is important to find the balance and mind yourself, you know.
Yeah.
Especially when these are your babies, like you are putting them out to the world for people to enjoy, and that can be very draining and a big worry. But so far, they've been
that's
good.
why I love the compliments. I'm like, great, gush over me as much as you want.
Thank you. So I'm going to pass you over to Claire now for the next few questions.
So following on from what we were just talking about, what to you are the most important elements of good writing?
I think good dialogue is incredibly important to me. Flowing writing is very, very important to me. But equally, if you are someone who wants to pick up something and maybe think on the wider world, maybe think these grand thoughts, you know, you can have the most beautiful language in the world and it can really mean something to you. And I mean, there's definitely sentences and paragraphs that have stayed with me for years, and what I would call beautiful writing and good writing. And so I think it depends on the project and depends on the genre and depends on the reader and depends on what you want to give out to the world. And if it's the best that you can do with that, I think you can't go wrong.
That's excellent. Yeah. That a lot, like I can see that in your writing. So you're succeeding in getting that. No, honestly, it is. It's all clicking. So this year alone, you've managed to release 2 books, which is absolutely astonishing. I can't even comprehend how you could possibly do that. But how was that process for you? Was that a lot of pressure, or was it quite? I know writing a book is full of pressure anyway, but 2 in the 1 year, was that a big undertaking?
It is and it isn't. I think, I mean, my publisher do expect me to write 2 books a year, but they're always very keen to be like, if you hit a snafu, if you hit a wall, just tell us. Like, it's fine. It's not the end of the world. So there's pressure on you to write, but at the same time, I know if I don't manage to, if I try my best but don't manage to, they're not going to strike me down. Everything's fine. When you're writing 2 books a year, it's very, I'd say, important that you know what you're doing. I don't really know what I'm doing, but within the genre that I'm writing now, I'm able to do it. I can do it. I can write romantic comedies. That's fine. If you turn it around and said, Catherine, we need you to write a crime book, I'd be like, well, I wouldn't be. It would, like, maybe 2 or 3 years down the line, I would be able to. And that, so the fact that I'm able to love the genre, look at the genre, know the genre inside out, means I can come up with it very, very quickly. But it does mean that you have to work at that little bit hard. You don't necessarily get breaks, and you'll often hear writers talk about how important it is to have breaks from the manuscript. You know, put the manuscript in a drawer for 6 weeks, for 2 months, and go away from it. I don't get any of that. And that is very, very tough. And that is why I often talk about how sick I am of my books by the end of the process. Like, I'm so sick of it because I haven't had a break from it, and I've been reading it over and over and over again. So it is tough. I find that there's not a lot of time for promotion. And this year with Holiday Romance is really the only time, and I say promotion, me on Instagram, like, is really the only time I've been trying to talk about the book and try to keep promoting the book, because it is a Christmas book and I'm aware that it won't always be Christmas time. So I won't always be talking about the book. So it's important I do it now. But even that I find really, really difficult to be promoting it while I'm in the middle of the 4th book. I do find it really, really hard. So it is tough. I don't know if I'd be able to do it if it wasn't romantic comedies. But so it's hard work, but doable, but very, very doable.
Yeah, I'd say it's difficult enough. But with regards, so going back to the holiday romance there, so I really, really loved the characters in this book, and I found that the banter that was going on between Molly and Andrew, like from the get-go, was just so relatable. I don't know if that's just an Irish thing in a relationship or what to make of it, but like myself and my partner, we have a lot of sarcastic banter going on like continuously, and we were also friends for God a very long time before getting together, so we fit into like the friends to lovers and the second chance romance over here, the two of us.
Love
But
it.
do you base do you base your characters off people or couples that you know or have met, or are they like, do you take inspiration from them, or are they completely and utterly fictional?
They are completely fictional. There is not a single character or like, and there's nothing in my books that I take from real life, unless maybe I will ask a friend if I can use their dog's name. Or if I get bored, I will use a friend's name because I'm lazy and I don't want to look up names for some random character. But other than that, it's completely fictitious. And I couldn't. Maybe my friends are just boring. Sorry to my friends, and they don't have these grand romances or something. Like maybe because I do know writers who do take from real life all the time. And I get asked this question from friends, and sometimes friends will be in the middle of telling me a dating story, and they'll kind of look at me and go, "I'm like, I'm not putting it in a book. Like, I'm not. You're not that interesting. Like, it's fine." So entirely fictitious. Like, I really couldn't imagine. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I could ever do that. And I'm sure if something amazing happens, I will ask their permission and I will put them in. But no, entirely from my own little weird brain.
That's amazing, because it just feels so real,
Oh,
you know.
God.
Like, you feel like you could meet these people in the pub and they
Yeah.
could tell you their story and you'd be like, oh yeah, that's class. So with regards to you reading, so you obviously said that you were a reader before you were a writer. So what would your favourite genre be, or your favourite trope, you know? And also, you know, to write, do you have a particular trope that you particularly enjoy? Sorry, I've said particular twice there now.
Yeah, God, Claire. No,
I know, sorry about that.
I mean, I'm a really wide reader. I will say that, like, unfortunately, since I started writing romantic comedies, I haven't really read a lot of romantic comedies. I find it very, very difficult to read romantic comedies now, unless I've been asked specifically, you know, to blurb the book, which is when we might read it, and if we like it, we'll recommend it. Or if it's a big book that I just really want to read. Every time I read a romantic comedy now, I either get scared that I'll unintentionally plagiarize it, or that I will be reading it and I will get an idea. And I'll read it and they'll be describing a house. I'm like, well, I need to describe the house in my book. And I'll woke up, and I find it really, really difficult to read romantic comedies. So I read things that are completely the opposite of romantic comedies. I really love reading about white men stuck on Everest and like just disaster things. I also like white men business memoirs. I don't know why. I just like reading about their businesses. I listen to a lot on Audible about that. Love it. I love horror. I'm a huge horror fan. And I will read the creepiest stuff that you have ever, like, I love that. Like, and that is what I get into. That's what knocks my socks off. Like, anything that isn't romance, because again, with the 2 books a year, I am in the romance world. I am in the funny ha 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 world all the time. And so to read something that is the complete opposite of that is something that I naturally gravitate towards. And that's a post-COVID thing as well. Because during COVID, I could not read anything. I couldn't read a single book. I couldn't watch a movie. I couldn't take in any new content. I think a lot of people had this as well. Like, I really had to rely on, like, I watched the entirety of The Simpsons in 2020 because I just couldn't take in anything new. And I wanted to rely on old stuff. And so to get back into reading post-COVID, I was like, well, don't read things because someone says you have to or because you think you have to. Just read whatever you want all the time, and stop reading if you don't want. Like, throw the book away. Like, stop reading it if you don't want to read it. So really gravitating towards a pure mood reader in a way, and that just happens to be white men doing stuff, I guess.
That's so funny, in the sense that it really is chalk and cheese what you're reading and writing. It's fab. Yeah. So the next question that I have for you is more general, about books. What book do you recommend for someone who wants to get into reading or to get back into reading after a slump?
Sure. I think and I think this is something we all go through. And it's funny, a friend of mine said, who used to be a big reader in his teenage years, he said he walked into a bookshop that I think most book readers feel very, very comfortable in. And he said he walked into a bookshop and he got so intimidated. He didn't know where to start. He didn't know what to look at. He didn't know what to do. He didn't want to ask anyone, and he just walked out again. Because you're faced with all of that choice. And I think we also get that online. There is all this choice. When I am in slumps, and I get into slumps a lot, I have found the best thing to do is a reread. So rereading a book that you loved in the past, and then working off of that, I think can be really, really good. So not maybe necessarily picking up something that you're going to have to learn. And we all learn when we pick up a new book. We all have to learn new characters, a new world, a new something. We have to adjust our mindsets a little bit. And I think adjusting that mindset is what people struggle with. Because I think a lot of times we'll pick up a book and we'll get a page, 2 pages in, we'll go, no, and we'll put it down, we'll do another one, go, no, I don't want to. And, and that's what happens. Whereas rereading, even if we forget all about the book, we already know the story, we already know these characters, there can be a sense of comfort in it. So, for example, I bought myself very shiny, nice editions of the Hunger Games series for Christmas, and I'm going to reread the Hunger Games, and I cannot wait. I am very, very excited. And people will lean on, not necessarily a childhood book, but if there is a book that you read and that you loved, I think that is the best way to fall back in love with reading again and with the habit of reading. And that's often the way I'm just getting the habit of picking up a book, be it on an audio, Kindle, a paperback, hardback, whatever. It's just getting back into that again. And then once your brain is moving like that, don't take a break, hop on to the next one. Go onto Amazon and go like, readers also enjoy this, and and keep going that way. But I think it can be a real open door is sometimes to take a step back.
That's excellent advice.
I think so.
Because it is very comfortable to pick up an old favourite and just, relax into it like a big hug. And then you do get, you're dead right. That's brilliant.
This is reading is supposed to be fun. Let me just say, it's not supposed to be it is supposed to be fun most of the time. So I think we forget that a lot of the time because we're trying to catch up with everybody. So I think, comfort.
Yeah, and I think even on Bookstagram, so I only joined Bookstagram earlier on this year, and I very quickly fell into the habit of I have to read this book because everybody is reading and reviewing this, and as Rebecca said, we started this because I went to Rebecca and I said, I'm kind of sick of just reviewing. I want to talk more about what's happening because we don't have the platform for that unless I come on and talk to myself on a screen, which is that's not having any bit of a conversation. No. So it is great to be able to sit down and now start talking and having these conversations with other people that are into reading. So can we ask you, who are your go-to authors? So you obviously love the Hunger Games, but is there anybody else that you would automatically go and pick up if you see the pick up something?
Again, to be the complete opposite of what I write and do, I have a few auto-buy authors where I get so excited about them and I pre-order them months and months in advance. One is Jane Harper. I don't know if you read Jane Harper. She is an Australian crime author. She writes books set in Australia, in the outback, and I, for some reason, love them. I love these. I am not a big crime reader. I'd love to get into crime. It is on because I think I am missing out on loads, and I'd love to get into that. But for some reason, Jane Harper, I will read her to the day I die. She is my favorite author. I love her books. I love how she crafts a story. She took a year off this year. No new book came out this year, and I was furious. So I am very excited for her next one. Again, the creepy. I love Stacey Halls, who writes sort of creepy historical fiction. I think she writes, and again, maybe this goes back to good writing. She writes beautifully. She writes very, very well, but she writes. You can read it, is what I say, and it all tells the story and it all sets the scene. And I will read her in a day, and I just adore her. And then I guess fantasy-wise, I really love Leigh Bardugo. I think she is, again, a fantastic storyteller who writes very, very well. And I expect high quality when I pick up a book from her. I expect to fall in love with it. And those books, whatever they write, I will pick it up. I will give them a shot and I will pick it up. There's not many who are like that for me, but those three are definitely top tier for me.
Excellent. Thank you for those. Are you interested in doing a 10-question quickfire round?
How quick are we talking?
You get 2 options. You shout one out.
Okay.
this or that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Listeners
Do you
can't
want-
see my very nervous face, but
No.
They're not bad.
They're not. Do you want to do them, Rebecca? I'll let you.
Oh yeah.
Or do you have the?
I have the document
sheet.
there, yeah. 2 seconds. Okay.
my heart's going crazy.
You don't have to at all.
You don't
This
have
is
to.
just-
We'll do it. We'll go for it.
We make it sound way worse than what this is.
I know. Yeah.
You'll hear the first
Sorry.
one and you'll be like, oh, for God's sake. Okay, so number
They're very
one.
deep.
Number one. Hardback or paperback?
Paperback.
Ebook or
No, I lied. Hardback. It's hardback.
number two, ebook or audio?
Oh, ebook.
Okay, number three, DNF, do not finish, or power through.
DNF all the way, baby.
Number four, bookmark or fold the corner.
Bookmark.
Five, lend books to friends or no way.
No way. One dropped Station 11 in the bath. My beautiful copy of Station dropped in the and then she gave it back to me like, oh, here you go. And I was like, what?
Okay, yeah. I understand,
again.
so I understand. Number six, book hoarder or get rid of them.
Get rid of them, but only recently.
Number seven, read one book at a time or multiple.
I used to be multiple, now I'm a one book girl.
Oh, okay.
Mm.
That's interesting because a lot of people it's the other way around.
Mhm.
Number eight, borrow or buy.
Bye.
Number nine, tag authors in posts or no.
I mean, if purely positive, not a single bad thing, tag away. If even the slightest bit of criticism, just quieten down a bit. It's okay. They don't need to see that.
And number 10, were Ross and Rachel on a break? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. We were on a break.
I had to add that one in. I was like, I'm sure Catherine wouldn't mind this non-book related question.
They were on a break.
Okay, great. That was
There we go.
a nice way to round it off.
On that note,
On that note, Sinead, thank you so much, Catherine.
You're so
for
good
being
and
our
so much
first, Our first author interview.
I'm honoured.
Yes, so this will be coming out just before Christmas. This episode, for anyone listening, it is a few days before Christmas at this point. There is still time to buy holiday romance.
So much time.
Yeah,
all the time in the
for
world.
everyone in your family, all of your friends.
Lovely gift. Yeah.
Also, your enemies. It's it's
your
fine. We can
enemies,
bring
yeah.
people together.
Yeah, everyone.
Just before we finish up, if people want to follow you on Instagram to catch you there, what's your Instagram handle?
Yep. So it's Cat Walsh Writer, CAT Walsh Writer, and I'm on Twitter as well, but very just once a week. You'll get my weekly tweet.
Sporadically,
Yeah. Lurking, but not
Insta's the
posting.
place to be.
Yeah, that's where I'm at my wildest.
Is there anything you'd like to add, Catherine, before we finish up?
No, just thank you guys so much for having me on. Thank you for all the support, and best of luck with the podcast. I hope everyone has a really lovely Christmas and a happy New Year.
Thank you very
And
much.
same to you, and best of luck with book Ivra 4.
Thank you. Good
We
morning.
will be pre-ordering as soon as
Thank you.
that's available. Thank you very much, Catherine Walsh.
Thank you, guys.
So after that wonderful interview with Catherine Walsh, which was so much fun, it is now time for our recommendations, or I suppose more specifically for this episode, my recommendations. So of the two of us, I would be the one that reads romance more, and keeping in with the topic and the vibe of today's podcast episode, today's chapter, it is going to be romance recommendations today. So, as well as recommendations of my own books I've read, books I have enjoyed in the last year or so, I also asked my fellow club members of the Pros Before Bros Romance Book Club to see what they felt would be similar books to those of Catherine Walsh's. So basically, if you have enjoyed any of Catherine Walsh's books, you should enjoy these as well. If you haven't read all of her books, absolutely go and rectify that now. And Catherine herself has confirmed on her own Instagram in the last few days that her new book will be called The Matchmaker. It looks and sounds brilliant. So the first one that I felt would be really apt would be Tessa Bailey. Now, her books are probably a little bit spicier than Catherine Walsh's ones, but she has become so popular and has had so much success in the last year for a good reason. 2 books in particular, It Happened One Summer and Hook, Line and Sinker, are a duology where you have similar characters in both books. The first book focused on one sister, with the second book focused on the other in the small little fishing town of Westport, not in Mayo, but in America. Now, Tessa Bailey, as was said in the book club chat, Tessa Bailey is kind of like a nice tikka masala in terms of spice levels. Whereas if that is a bit too hot for you, you could go with someone like Emily Henry, who is more of a biryani on the spiciness scale. And her most popular book is Book Lovers. And again, very fun, very flirty, a lot of witty banter in these books, very similar to Catherine Walsh's. And spice level would be relatively similar as well. It's not terribly raunchy. So following on from Emily Henry, similar to her, then you'd have Christine Lauren. The Unhoneymooners in particular, or the Soulmate Equation, are 2 that are very popular from them. And one that I haven't read myself but was recommended to me was The X Talk by Rachel Lynn Solomon. People who work on a radio show together and they end up having to pretend to be exes for this new radio show that they're doing. So it's this fake dating scenario, enemies to lovers, all of the best tropes. So that's one I'm intending on reading myself. For a slightly different slant then, we have Tessa Dare, who is historical romance. Think of your, I suppose, more traditional kind of bodice ripper covers, you know, the clinch covers as they're called, where you have the hero and the heroine on the front, locked in an embrace. And but apparently her books are quite funny as well, and quite witty. And her most recent series is the Girl Meets Duke series, where 2 people who are essentially enemies in the story, from what I can gather, they agree that if in 10 years' time they're both still not married, they will marry each other, and various escapades ensue. And she is described as a mild to medium curry in terms of spice level. For someone kind of, I suppose, more close to home, we have Mary McFarlane, who would be a little bit different. Her books wouldn't necessarily be romance books if you were strictly categorizing them, which I'm not saying is the right thing to do or not. But there is a lot of romance in her books, and the one that I specifically recommended was If I Never Met You. So we have a variety of books there. Oh, I almost forgot my favourite romance series. Chloe Lee's the Bergman Brothers series. So they're on to book 5 at the moment, as far as I know, and the next one is coming out imminently. So it's about a family. You know, it's called the Bergman Brothers series, but one of the books is about their sister as well, and a future one will be about another sister. But essentially, each book is revolved around one member of the family and them falling in love, and all the tropes are covered. Everything you could possibly want is there. Also, very importantly, you have absolutely brilliant representation in her books. So various disabilities, various issues, all sorts of things are covered that you don't often see in other books. So they're brilliant for that. They are a bit spicy as well. Not that I'm complaining, but just for people who maybe like a bit of fun, like a bit of romance, but don't necessarily want to be blushing reading the book in the waiting room of their doctors, if you know what I mean. So if you have any other recommendations, we'd love to hear them. Romance is such a varied genre. It's, you know, as we were saying in the interview, it's quite possible you might pick up one of these authors, you might read a book and go, oh, I didn't enjoy it. It wasn't for me. But that might just have been that author. It's not necessarily that the genre as a whole is not for you. So definitely maybe try a few. And if after a few you're going, yeah, look, just this isn't the style of story I enjoy, look, fair enough. But definitely we would highly recommend that you give the genre a chance, especially if you haven't previously. And we would love to hear what you all think. Thank you so much for listening to this edition of Another Chapter podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, like and share to keep the book conversation going. Thank you to Helen Becerra for the graphics, Mark Neville for the mixing, and to each of our contributors. Music is Make It Work by All Good Folks.
Don't forget to follow along on Instagram at Another Chapter Podcast. We'll see you there.